This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
I really love LinkedIn. And advice I would give to any researcher is immediately become friends with the fundraisers, because as those fundraisers build their professional, network, and we all know fundraisers don't stay many places for long. They move to another organization, and guess what? They build their professional network at that next organization. So now you're friends with someone that has doubled their professional network.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. This interview is part of the Career Curious series. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Charles Snyder, Head of Advancement Services at University College Dublin. Yes, Dublin, Ireland. Hello, Charles. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Thank you for having me.
So before we jump into what it's like to run advancement services all the way over in Ireland, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about your background and how you got into prospect research.
Sure, absolutely. I started in prospect research with Loyola New Orleans in 1994, right out of college. And I have my undergraduate degree in the humanities. Because I was busy running cross country and track, I really didn't pay attention to my undergraduate education whatsoever. And at the end of 4 years, I needed to graduate in something. And I went to my advisors, who weren't my coach for the first time in 4 years. I said, what can I make of this? Showed them all of my credits, and they say, well, you take 2 more communication classes and you can get a degree in the humanities, which is as useful as it sounds. And I applied, it was to hundreds of jobs. I think well over 220 jobs. And this was at a time when you got the newspaper, you looked at the one ads. If you wanted a job in LA, you went and got LA newspapers, and you looked at the jobs, and you got the hiring manager's name, and you wrote a letter, and you mailed the letter, and it cost you money. And I got 2 interview offers. Both of them were for prospect researcher. And one of them was at Loyola New Orleans, and the other one's at University Southern Louisiana. And I went and interviewed for both of them and actually discovered what they were. And who knew that a humanities degree, working in the library and being a phonathon caller, was a great education and background to be a prospect researcher. So I was very lucky enough that Edward D'Antoni offered me my first job at Loyola New Orleans. And I got in there and just started learning, and learned that it was a great fit for me. I really enjoyed it, being able to pull all the information from different resources and synthesize it into one dossier and communicate that to a gift officer with actionable intelligence. That was a whole lot of fun. And again, who knew that doing all that research in philosophy and humanities was going to pay off for me.
So are you telling me that your first job out of college was prospect research?
Absolutely. It was my very, very first paying job that I wasn't embarrassed to tell people about. I mean, I cleaned pools and did stuff like that prior to this, but this was my first professional job.
Wow, that's great. I didn't know that. So your career has been in prospect research.
Yes, entirely in prospect research.
And at that time, you were still using books and the library, as well as probably some internet, right?
Yeah, including CD-ROMs. We were really excited to be able to get the blue books on CD-ROMs. But yeah, we were still going to the assessor's office downtown. They didn't have any of that online. If you wanted assessor information from somewhere in the middle of Idaho, you called that assessor's county office. And one time I remember I called that office and I got the person's cousin, and they told me more than I could have gotten from the assessor's document. It was very handy.
Wow.
Yes, but you had to call people to get information. You had to go and find the book, and in a ways that was great education for my next position, which was at Scripps Foundation, which a lot of the information, a lot of the people we researched had been retired for 10 or 15 years. So all the information on them were in old Who's Who's books, which Kathy Taronis was just smart enough to have archived for the foundation. And then, as we moved into, the online stuff, I was using, what was it? We were using LexisNexis very early on. It was all in a text interchange where we had to use the Boolean logic to create search strings and pull out information. And dialogue, I don't know if you remember dialogue, but that was a horrendous thing that you used to get binders every year on the updates of how to use dialogue and what files to go to. It was horrible.
I've heard stories about dialogue, but I never used it. I was Alexis.
It was terrible. And it's so, you go in and now you want to know something, you go to an iWave or just go to something and plug one name in it, searches all these incredible catalogs and comes back with what would have taken us a week to do research-wise. And now you can do it in a matter of hours.
It is amazing. It is. So when you told me that you were moving to Ireland with a prospect research position or advancement position, I was really surprised. I'm curious if you're willing to share the story about how did that move happen? Why did you go to Ireland?
Oh, sure. So in 2007, as I said, my first job was in prospect research right out of college. My next job came through a networking opportunity that I had made through APRA. I did some excellent networking, did my work at conferences. I met people. I went after hours. I was forced, of course, to have a few drinks and meet people next to me and chat them up. And through my connections, I learned of this great opportunity out in Southern California. So I went over there to work. And my next opportunity came again from networking at APRA. All these opportunities have come falling into my lap. So around 2007, I just kind of took a step back and I said, well, wait a minute, this is the only career I've known. Is this really what I want to do? Is this my future? And if I do, where do I want to go with it? And 2007, if you remember back, 2007, 2008, 2009, was the absolute worst time to maybe take a career break and to think about what do I want to do, as all the jobs just dissipated into the ether. But what it did teach me is a couple of things. One, I decided I did want to stay in fundraising. I did want to stay in higher education as opposed to healthcare or organizations. But I wanted more control. I wanted to do, I thought I had more to offer than prospect research, although I still enjoy prospect research. It was getting pretty specialized, especially for the bigger shops. And you're wanting to advance up in your career, you want to advance to more responsibilities. Advancement services was a natural progression for that. So I looked at my education, I looked at my skill set, and I determined what I needed. I certainly needed some more education, some more experience in high-level communications, business communications. I needed some more education in data, in the data side of it, in the CRM side of it, that sort of thing. And so I just dedicated the next few years to getting that information. I went and got another master's degree. I got this one actually in a more useful one, which was strategic communications, and that really focused on communications within an organization and in leadership. So that was very helpful, very practical. I use information from that degree and from the mentors I've made there. I use that information every day. Very helpful. And then I got some more experience. I found some jobs that allowed me to get more experience into that data side that I wanted. And then when I decided what I wanted to do, then I decided that what are my dream parameters for a job I want? And it was I wanted to work with dedicated, professional, positive people who understood work-life balance. That absolutely there is the hardest thing to find. 2, I wanted to run an advancement services unit. And 3, I wanted to live in a place that I loved, that had educational opportunities for my children, that had recreational opportunities for me, that was safe, that was interesting. And those were my qualifications. And it didn't matter where it was. If it met those 3 things, I was going to investigate it and see if it was the right place for me. And I had several opportunities. I went on a lot of interviews. Usually if it were 2 of those strong 3 points, it was probably worth a good thing to investigate, maybe even take the position. But when this position came across and I found all 3 things, I mean, how could I possibly say no to that? It was just an exciting opportunity. And my wife and I have always talked about living and working in Europe. My wife is a huge fan of France and Paris, and flights from here on a typical year. Flights from Dublin to Paris run in between 25 to 45 euros, much better than the $500 to $700 from Miami. So yeah, I just couldn't possibly pass up the opportunity. And now I can honestly say I work with all three of those things. I run an advancement service unit with an incredible team. I work with dedicated professionals who are all positive and they understand work-life balance. And I live in an incredible, exciting place with mountains literally right out my front door.
That is a beautiful thing. That's amazing.
Yep, but it absolutely all started with what do I want to do and what makes me happy? Because even in these times where we sit at home in front of our computer, we are sitting at home in front of our computer doing the same thing 8 hours, and you really have to enjoy it.
Well, I think any time of crisis, and certainly in 2007, there was crisis, it makes us pause and evaluate what's important to us. And you clearly did that.
Yep, and it wasn't easy. Looking back on it, I probably was young enough that it was less scary, but now with some foresight, it was really scary. I guess I was too young to be scared.
Well, and it helps to see that it took you this long. You started in 2007 thinking about it, but it didn't happen in a year or 2 years. It took a while.
Absolutely. In 2009, I did take a couple of years off from development, from working with a team. And I kept my hand in the development side by doing some consulting. And that's when I worked on my other master's degree. And I also worked with my sister and father. My sister ran a conglomerate of body shops in Northwest Florida, and my father ran the towing service for those body shops. So during the day, I would operate a tow truck, everything from getting new contracts to working on the tow truck to hooking up things and moving them. And in the evening, I would go either do a graduate class or go teach a graduate class or fit in consulting time with smaller nonprofits in between those. So I was running 3 things. And I really got to see the private side, the private business side of our business. Most of the people we do research on, most of the wealth in the United States is private company, private business. And it really wasn't until I operated within that realm that I understood the constraints, the stresses, and the wealth opportunities that private companies, specifically family-owned private companies, have available to them. Fascinating.
We're just learning all kinds of things about you today, Charles.
Yep, I can drive a rather large tow truck.
That's amazing. Well, but now you're in Ireland, so that's not very helpful to me. So you've been in your position in Ireland 6 months now?
Yeah, I started in June. So at the end of this month, it will be 8 months.
Is there anything you found that was unexpected?
Well, one thing that's unexpected are the similarities. I really didn't expect it to be so similar. I mean, today I had a deja vu moment where I had the same conversation, but at a different organization and about a different fundraiser. But it was the same problem that we were having in the US. It was a fundraiser spending a great deal of time with someone that really wasn't going to be producing a large gift, but was producing income at some level and trying to figure out, is that the right use of their time? Could there be meeting more people? And it was the same words. It was the same conversation. I could have just recorded it and replayed my responses and my opinions for the two. One of the things here is philanthropy is a little bit different here. It was being approached, I think, more transactional. And philanthropy here is a really intimate thing. And most of the donors we work with think of philanthropy as dealing with those that are, with intense, dire need. So there's a lot of great philanthropy being done with the homeless, with healthcare organizations, which are absolutely incredibly well-deserved organizations. And so the university has to make a bit of a stronger case about why we also play a role in making the world a better place and in advancing the causes. There's a need to make that case. And that's why we can see that it was much more transactional. It was a very much more of we can help you with your recruiting needs if you can fund this thing. And now I think all of Ireland, probably the EU as well, is moving into that more donor-centric model where we have a conversation and we really want to fund what the donor is passionate about. And it really doesn't have to be a quid pro quo kind of relationship, but it can be an investigation and a discovery and a total immersion of a donor into what the university can help support and what it can advance.
Well, that's great. So you're part of this change, or you're seeing yourself as part of this change in culture.
Yeah, I think so. Again, I've been here 8 months. I definitely don't want to put myself as, the leader of the change, or it's something that started changing, I think. But, as the states, both in the UK and in the EU, the state is stepping away from financing complete and total education. And so there's definitely more of a need for higher education philanthropy.
Well, that is a big change.
Yeah.
So back to your family and your experience with the move, what's it been like to move the entire family? And I guess, how has COVID-19 impacted that move?
Right. Well, as I said, we moved from New Orleans to San Diego to LA. That was just a short 100-mile move. We moved from LA to Northwest Washington, and then from Northwest Washington over to Florida, from Florida to New York to Kansas back to South Florida. And this was probably the easiest move we've ever had. One, because we didn't bring a whole lot of stuff. We left a lot of that stuff back there. But one, I was amazed how much cheaper ocean freight is as opposed to land freight. So that was more interesting. Getting into a school, my son into a school was a little bit more challenging, as it's a completely different system. We had more choices. We could get my son into a traditional Irish school or something more in tune to the American style. And we chose the traditional Irish school, which grades are less important. You have two big moments in your life for a student here is the certificate, where you move up from the lower end of your high school era to the upper end of your high school career. And the leaving certificate is when you deemed it you're knowledgeable enough to leave secondary. And those are your two grades. And if you don't do well on them, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So there's a lot of pressure being put, on those two moments in the student's life. And the leaving certificate makes a difference. It determines what they get, not only what university they're able to get into, but what they can study. If they do poorly in engineering, then they're not going to be able to enter an engineering program, regardless of what their passion is. We educated ourselves. We had a lot of conversation with the educators here. And to my surprise, my son's like, that sounds awesome. That sounds fantastic. Let's go for it. My son is completely and totally immersed in the Irish educational system and made friends already and is using Irish slang and the whole 9 yards.
That's great. As long as it's not, bad words.
Well, we wouldn't notice if they were. Slang is completely different.
So before I let you go, I'm wondering if you have any tips for others who are thinking about a big move like this, maybe across country, but maybe to another country altogether.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, again, my move over here didn't happen overnight. In 2010 is when I started making my connections and networking with HR representatives over here, people who were involved with consulting firms that did hiring for higher education. I started making my contacts. And I started seeking out advice, asking them what I needed. What is the difference between applying for a job in the US and applying for a job in the EU? They call a resume a CV. So what else is different? What emphasis do they put on? And that started a long time ago. The first job that was not in the US that I applied for was in 2011. So it again, like you said, it didn't happen overnight. It took a long time. I just kept my eyes out for the right opportunity at the right time, at the right moment, and got very lucky.
So I'm hearing networking as a key element, and not just networking with other researchers, but you mentioned recruiters and HR personnel and making sure you understand, well, I guess doing your research.
Absolutely. And like you said, HR, personnel, VPs, fundraisers. I really love LinkedIn. And advice I would give to any researcher is immediately become friends with the fundraisers, because as those fundraisers build their professional, network, and we all know fundraisers don't stay many places for long, they move to another organization. And guess what? They build their professional network at that next organization. So now you're friends with someone that has doubled their professional network. And very friendly with almost all of the fundraisers I've worked with and continue to work with. Stay in touch and just keep working on your network.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Charles.
Sure. It's been lovely.
That was Charles Snyder, Head of Advancement Services at University College Dublin in Ireland. If you've been looking to make big changes in your career, now during a pandemic could be a great time to take stock of what's most important to you and outline the kind of journey that will take you to your destination, whatever country that might be in. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with powerful resources, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member of the learning community. See you there.